Good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to Zimbabwe Daily. This is the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, and we are on day 10. We're looking at gender-based violence and the church. Is this something that is real, or is it something that we just read about in the newspapers? No one is involved. Who can blame the pastor? Who can blame Manuel Sangano? Let us have this conversation just after this short break. Welcome back once again. This is Zimbabwe Daily, your platform for the right kind of information that we need to build our nation. And on the program today, I've invited three powerful servants of the Lord to help me unpack this topic. I'll allow each one of them to introduce themselves. So we have our studio guests, and we also have our guest in South Africa. So I'll allow Pastor Phil to start, and then we go like that.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good morning to our viewers. My name is Philip Chidavaenzi, or Pastor Phil. I am a pastor, a teacher of the word, and an author. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Coach Lynn, affectionately known as Mama Lynn. I am a pastor and a certified life coach.
Brilliant. Apostle D.
Hi, everybody. Hello, everybody. My name is Apostle D. As you have heard, some call me a DM. I am a father to many. I am an author. I am a pastor and apostle. I'm running a ministry based in Johannesburg, South Africa, but we also do father and mentor over 400 pastors all over the world. I am very active in business, and I train business people, raise politicians, and I think it's one of the reasons why these guys have brought me here. And I also do a lot of women's ministry, and I'm an author as well.
Brilliant. I'm also an author. Everyone is saying they are authors, eh? Wonderful. So thank you so much. Apostle Duncan Manyonda is joining us all the way from South Africa. So we're excited to have this conversation with all of them. Thank you so much, Dr. Phil and Mama Lynn, their husband and wife. So I thought it was important that we also have a couple in the studio who are in ministry to take us through the issues of GBV and the church. Right, I'll start with you, Dr. Phil. What is GBV in the church?
Okay, when we look at gender-based violence, you can't compartmentalize it, if I can use that word. Whether it's in the home, whether it's in the church, whether it's in the marketplace, gender-based violence is the same. So we are basically looking at violence that happen between men and women. A lot of times it happens, especially people within intimate relationships. So you find that it manifests in the same way, whether it's in the church and whether it's at home or whether it's in the marketplace. But the critical thing is that it's from one gender to another, which is why it's called gender-based violence. And a lot of times it emanates from the fact that we have two different genders, and there's probably one gender that is seeking to assert dominance over the other.
Right. Yes. Right. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Phil. Mama Lynn, can you contextualize for us? Because as it's been said, gender-based violence is gender-based violence. It doesn't matter whether it's in the home, in the workplace, or at church. Now, what is happening in the church that amounts to gender-based violence?
I think I can just highlight one or two things.
Yeah.
And I think from our different experiences, they can also highlight. But I'll speak as someone who deals with women on a daily basis. And you'll find one of the ways gender-based violence manifests that I have had a lot of women cry about or complain about in the church
Mhm.
is the issue of disproportionate, what can I say, when it comes to the issues of church governance and leadership.
Right.
This is where most women, they cry foul in the church, because in as much as we have seen a bit of progress in women also asserting themselves as spiritual leaders, you realize that most of the times, I've also questioned this. I thank God that my father in the Lord is also here, is that we hear a lot about spiritual fathers.
Mm.
So where are the spiritual mothers?
Right.
Are we saying women cannot provide spiritual oversight?
Right.
So for me, this is where another issue then comes in, as in, it means women, they can provide spiritual oversight to a certain degree, but not at the same level as women. So, because if we are saying there's a spiritual father, it figures there's a spiritual mother.
Right.
But how many times have you heard
about that? Yeah.
about spiritual mothering or spiritual, because it's basically most of the times it's about spiritual fatherhood.
Yeah.
So now it then cascades even to the lower levels in church, because you find there are women, like single women, they are frowned upon when they start ministries.
Right.
You cannot start a ministry when you're not married.
Okay.
You cannot run a successful ministry as a single woman.
Right.
You cannot speak successfully to married women as a single woman.
Right.
But then when you look 3/4 of the New Testament, it was written by Apostle Paul. And Apostle Paul was a man. And most of the advice that we give, that we follow in the church pertaining to marriage is from Apostle Paul.
And he was not married.
But he was not married.
Right.
So now when it's a single woman,
Mm.
it becomes a challenge.
Right.
There's another issue that I always question. There's a lot of china chemadzimai, chine china chevarume. There are a lot of conferences around women, how to take care of our husbands. But our men also taught how to take care of their wives.
Right.
Because when you read, Paul says, wives submit to your husbands. That one is a given.
Right.
And almost every ladies' meeting, that one is hammered on.
Right.
But what about the part where he says, as men, love your wives as Christ loved the church?
Yeah.
Why have we not taken time to interrogate what that scripture means? How did Christ love the church?
Right.
Did Christ bully the church?
Right.
Did Christ do emotional damage to the church? How did Christ love the church?
Good. We'll hold on to that question and cross over to ADM. We want to understand ADM as what Pastor Lynn has highlighted are the issues of power struggles and inequality that general society is struggling with, the same that the church is struggling with.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, and to all our predecessors. And, one of the things, remember, I'm called apostle. One grace that apostles do have is a grace to break down doctrine. So I am not going to look at this issue from a psychological point of view. I'm not going to look at this issue from a political point of view, but I'm going to look at this thing from a biblical point of view. And we make the Bible our point of reference. Now, number one, they are structures and hierarchies that are embedded in the Bible that we must never tamper with and violate. And the moment we violate them, they violate us. So the first thing is we must understand that the hierarchy of God is the Godhead, then the man, and then the woman, and then the children. That's the hierarchy of God. Now, does that make women lesser than women? Precisely not. It's just a hierarchy of function. Number two, we also don't run ministries because we want to start a ministry. We are called by God. And if you are called by God like Deborah, the Bible says, until I, Deborah, rose, you have nobody to fight with. So the Bible says, women are weaker vessels. It's just talking about the container, but it's not about the content. So people do not follow containers. People follow content. If the calling of God is there, then there should never be a struggle. Now, the reason why we find this fight is because we are trying to become very carnal. We are trying to put the quota system. We want equal representation. But I am not God. I am not the one that calls people. You know,
Right.
God calls his people as and when he wishes. Now, number three, let me also say in the New Testament, we find Priscilla and Aquila. You know, we find very powerful couples that did ministry together. We find women that did ministry together. In fact, the Bible says concerning you know, the evangelist Philip, that he had 4 daughters. All of them were prophets, and these were some of the prophets that prophesied over Paul. You know, we find in the book of Romans, there is a lady called Julia, one of the most powerful apostolic women that has ever lived. So let's go down memory lane. We find people like Catherine Kuhlman, where people like Benny Hinn and so on, they're coming from. So should we say spiritual mother, Lynn? I think in the book that was actually edited by you and Dr. Phil, you know, spiritual father is just a term of a function. It's an office. So whether you are a woman like Lynn is a father to many because she is mentoring, giving cover to many. It's just a term. It's just a term, but it has got no gender that is you know, attached to it. And the violence now that we find in the church, you know, like Dr. Phil says, for me, one of the dimensions where this violence comes is when one group abuses the power that it has, you know, to violate another group. And unfortunately, we always talk about women, but one of the powers that is now being extremely abused in the church is the soft power that women have.
Yes.
Okay.
Soft power that women have. And in my 24 years of practice, I am actually restoring a lot of men, but it's just that men are not vocal, that have been, you know, that have gone through a lot of violence from women. And female violence is violence from female. Most of it is not physical, but it's very emotional. And, you know, I am dealing a lot in one of the theses that I'm doing in one of my degrees. I'm dealing a lot with issues of verbal abuse, which is more damaging than physical abuse. There are men who do not believe that they are men anymore. They do not. And also, one of the soft powers that men have is the inner hidden issues about sexuality, about men's performance, and some of the crimes that men have committed, and these skeletons that some men have in their bottom drawers. Women are also using them as weapons. So this violence is coming from everywhere. Number 5, we also do have violence from men of the cloth that are anointed.
Right.
And they are using, I remember one of the girls that came, you know, to us, you know, being violated by a number of men, apostles and prophets, because she was trying to look for restoration. She had been raped. And when these men realized that we are dealing with a victim of rape, and she became, you know, a series of you know, we do find that. So it's neither here or there. So we have to look at this discussion from a broader perspective, Yvonne.
Right. Thank you so much, Apostle, for putting everything into perspective. I think it is clear that violence in the church is taking various forms. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, we go into the meat of the issue. Right. Thank you so much for coming back. This is second segment as we look at gender-based violence in the church. It is day 10, and in the studio I have Apostle Duncan Manyonda, I have Apostle Dr. Phil, and Prophetess Pastor Lynn Chidavaenzi, and we are just digging into this issue. We have had what has been said, the form that GBV is taking in the church. Now we want to move on and say, with the prevalence of GBV, as has been stated by Apostle and as you have said, how free are the people, the victims in the church to speak about it, that this apostle, this prophet, so and so has abused me? How are people free to do that?
Well, when you really look at it, I wouldn't say people are free. And I think the major reason for that is that those that hold the levers of power in the church, they are very influential, they are very powerful.
Right.
Sometimes they actually abuse, let me say, the spiritual power that they have. I can actually give you an example of a story that dominated the media in Zimbabwe a couple of years ago, of a church where women were being abused right, left, and center by the founder of the church. And when that issue came to court, they were actually testifying of, the kinds of threats that they received because they have seen other people punished,
Right.
for reporting such cases. So there was that kind of silence in the church. And now the other thing is you are looking at this man who is idolized. He's anointed, he's powerful, and you have thousands of people following him, believing in him. And then to go out there and claim that this person has abused me, already in your mind you are saying, who is going to believe me? Right. So there is that aspect that then makes it difficult for the victims to come out into the open and speak. And sometimes, even if you are not threatened to say, if you say this, you just tell yourself, I'm a nobody, but this person is very influential, they are very popular, they are known, so that in itself then brings that aspect of silence in the church. So everything is just swept under the carpet.
Right, and we've also seen a rise in divorce cases between men and women of God. They are divorcing on a daily basis. We've got also cases where an Mfundisi cannot really speak out against the abuse they are facing in the home because partly of what you have said, the issue that people idolize their papa. Mama, how have you been dealing with such cases? Have you come across any?
I have many, many. And it's quite unfortunate, but I think Apostle Adiam has already alluded to the fact of where he was talking about the issue of fatherhood.
Right.
And the challenge we have, especially with this, most of the churches that are mushrooming and starting, we have a lot of, there's an issue of accountability.
Right.
We have a lot of these young, especially as the young generation, where we don't have anyone that we are accountable to. We are a law unto ourselves.
Right.
So it's Pastor Phil and myself, and then Ivanabe Sangani. There is no ADM on top that I can talk to. There is no leader, there is no Lady Sheila that Mama Lynn can then talk to. So in that case, I always say, who pastors the pastor? So that's an issue that needs to be interrogated because you hear many, I think ADM is here, is going to help us because many of them, when you question them, they tell you that you can only have one father and who is God.
Right.
So I report to God because he's the one who called me.
Yes.
So the challenge now becomes, because most of the women, when they come, the first thing I ask them is, do you have a mentor, a father that you are accountable to,
yes,
that you have spoken to? And they'll tell you, we don't.
Right.
So in that kind of scenario, it's now difficult because they don't have anyone that they are accountable to, so they can do whatever they want to the woman. And the woman now does not have that platform where she can say, this is what is going on. How can I be helped?
Okay.
And then there's also the issue of ndiri mindfundisi. Vana vesangano vanozoti
right.
Kana mindfundisi variwo vari kunorepota kumapurisa.
Right.
This is what mfundisi does.
Right.
And even if she comes out, that issue is already pointed out to. Aiwa data vadai.
Right.
ADM. Aiwa vadai.
Now, Apostle.
Yes.
How are you dealing with these challenges? You are a father to ministers, and I know you are raising pastors, you are raising people who are running churches and ministries. Now, what is the one advice that you give them around the issues of accountability as highlighted by Mama Lynn?
Now, I have said it even in my book, Expectations of Sons. Anybody who speaks like what Mama Lynn is saying is an abuser. One of the telltale signs of an individual who is an abuser is an individual who says, I do not submit to any man, I only submit to God.
Right.
It's not true. It's not true. But however, it's another discussion for another day. But there might be accountability, but also, Yvonne, let me say this. Accountability has also become very difficult because it has been commercialized. Because I remember one guy said to me, Apostle, you've got hundreds of pastors that submit to you, so you must be earning a lot of money because all these guys are bringing money to you every month. And I said, no, that's not accountability. Now, I am driving somewhere because as much as they have a place of accountability has not become the accountability that we find in the Bible. It has become a money-making scheme. So Philip gives me $1,000 every month, and Lynn comes and says Philip is abusing me and so on. Many people do not think by the Spirit of God; they think by the pocket and the wallet, and so they are bound to say, you keep quiet, I'll pray for you, and so on, because they want to protect where their bread is buttered. That's one challenge that we have. Number two, we also do have fathers who are perpetrators of violence themselves.
Right.
So you cannot fix what is also broken in you.
Wow.
So half the time, we have fathers that are limping. It's like it's the bleeding leading the bleeding. Imagine going to surgery and the very doctor who is also operating you is also bleeding. It's difficult. And number three, let me say this to my sons and daughters and to everybody else. The 21st century church has been caught flat-footed because Jesus said, give us this day our daily bread, which means remain relevant to the day. So you begin to realize that, from about 20 years ago, when we started having HIV as a challenge, the church had no structures, had no education, and they had no revelation on how to handle HIV up to now. And whilst we're trying to catch up with HIV, the world has come with to reveal gender-based violence. Now, this issue is a little bit complicated because it involves breaking spiritual laws, number one, and laws of the land. Can I repeat? When you do commit gender-based violence, you are breaking spiritual laws, number one, and laws of the land. And laws of the land are legal issues now. But churches, it's high time they must realize that, as much as you have your deacon and the elders and so on, they must have the spokesperson for the church, because you, Yvonne, and your Zimbabwe Daily are going to come to me and say, hey, Apostle, we hear one of your pastors is beating up the wife. What do you think? Apostle was never taught to speak to media. This is where the disaster is starting. And because Apostle, and I gotta be blunt here, he wants to keep his church intact. So he distances himself from things that he's supposed to be involved in. Number 3, it's high time every church should have a legal arm. It's one of the things that I am doing in the book that I'm writing called The Gray Areas of Ministry, because we are now dealing with a lot of issues that are very legal, not only legal, but also, very, very dynamic. So after I counsel them, I need to go to my sons who are lawyers and say, guys, this is what I have said, and this is the counsel that I've given them. But from a legal perspective, where should this go? Should they report? Should they not? And if they are going to report, what are the repercussions? Number 1, to our ministry, to the name of Christ, to the couple, and so on and so forth. So the church, if I might say it in a very blunt way, has been caught flat-footed, and I don't think many churches, 99.9% of ministries now that exist, do not have the machine to handle what we are talking about.
Wow, thank you so much, Daddy, for bringing into perspective the things that ministries are struggling with. We are looking forward to that book, The Gray Areas of Ministry, right? We'll take a short break right now, and when we come back, we go to what should be done so that we stop GBV in our communities. Right, welcome back once again. This is day 10 as we commemorate 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. In the studio, I have Apostle Duncan Manyonda, all the way from South Africa. I have a couple, Dr. Phil and Pastor Lynn Chidavaenzi, to help me unpack this topic. Right, we want to move into the solutions for our communities. What sort of word, right? I always contend that the word is supposed to equip us, but somehow the same word has been used to make us lethargic in our approach to things. It has made us docile. We see abuse every day, we don't speak about it. We hear of abuses, we do not want to see what exactly is going on. We do not want to call our men and women of God to order. Why? Because the word says, touch not the anointed one of God. Now, what is the solution? What does community do in order to stop gender-based violence in the church?
Well, I think the first port of call is to understand that the challenge that we have as a church is that people are not really taking time to understand the word for themselves.
Right.
Okay. Because the scripture you just mentioned is actually one of the most abused scriptures, because it was not talking about pastors, it was not talking about leaders, it was talking about the children of Israel. Right. And the instruction was given to the nations through which they were moving, not to touch the children of Israel. Right. Because they were the anointed of the Lord. Now, having said that, we also need to understand that in as much as the church is a spiritual entity, it operates in a community. Right. It operates in a society that is governed by the law of the land. And Jesus said, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar. In other words, in as much as we are bound to submit to the spiritual laws of God, right, we are also bound to submit to the laws of the land in which we are living. Because so what it basically means for us as the churches, it means if there are violations within the church, and this is no longer just about you as the church, because right, now when there is gender-based violence in your church, this has gone beyond the confines of your church, right, because this is a violation of the law of the land. And the law itself sets the parameters concerning how that problem is handled and dealt with. Right. Because the moment we as pastors, as leaders of churches, try to sweep these matters under the carpet, it means we have also partaken of that same abuse. We are actually aiding the violation of the law.
Right.
So as the church leaders should allow the processes of the law to take place if there is a violation of the said law. And I think once we begin to do that, we will have the respect even of the society that we are supposed to minister to. Because like ADM has said, you have violated both a spiritual law and a law of the land. And both violations must attract penalties.
Okay, I'll just add on to what has already been said, and most of the things have already been touched on by ADM. What churches need to do, from my perspective, is to exercise an all hands on deck approach when it comes to these issues. For example, when we are narrowing it down to gender-based violence, because it's not only issues to do with gender that we are caught unawares as the church or clueless. There are a lot of things that I can go into, but now we are focusing on gender-based violence. Let's do what is called a gender audit as the church. Let's bring every player within the church leadership, the church experts, as ADM has put them. Let's identify. This is why I've always pushed the message that as a church, besides our ministers that are fivefold ministers on the pulpit only, we also need to identify fivefold ministers in the marketplace. These are our lawyers. These are the ones that now we bring to the table. Everyone, whether it's social worker, every person that we have in our church that can help us deal with this gender audit to do with gender violence, they need to come aboard. We need to bring the women themselves, because you find that 3/4 of the church pews, it's women. So most of the times when we do our church meetings and we have zero or small representation of women, it doesn't make sense. Because they are the ones, in as much as men are also suffering, but mostly it's women. So we need to bring a balance to the table. Let's come to the table and discuss this. And actually have a meeting and say we are having a gender audit. How as a church are we going to respond because the challenge as the church, sometimes we respond as in when something happens.
We are reactionary.
We are not responsive. Because when you are responsive, you analyze, you assess a situation. So let's bring all hands on deck. Our lawyers there, our leadership there, our members there. And then we begin to see how in case there's some ABCD happens, how to, as a church, to handle it. I can give you an example. There's a lady who came to me and said, I had to leave the church, but I'm the one who introduced my husband to this church. But the challenge is, every day I'll go to church in Dakaroa, and I'll tell my pastor, this is what is happening. But he will not act. Why? Because this man was responsible for paying the church rentals. He was responsible for also looking after the pastor and his wife and his children. So now if this thing is dealt with in such a manner, if there's a board that is responsible and for the gender audit, that's when we can say, Papa, if something like this happened, if our member does this, what can we do? What is the right redress to this situation? So gender audits are very important in churches.
So the church continues to be on the spotlight because this is where we spend most of our times, and this is where we also associate with different people and enjoy a sort of sane and safe space. But if the church has got teeth, now we ask, where do we go to? Apostle Duncan Manyonda, what is the solution? Where do the children run to?
Thank you once again. And one of the things that I began to do as a father to many, responsibility of mentoring and coaching and covering many people comes with, massive responsibility. So what I have personally done, what I learned from my own spiritual father and oversight, Bishop Tudu Bismarck, we have also come with a document called Ethics and Compliance. For anything that is not written, I want you to hear this, anything that is not written in black and white is either abused, underutilized, or not, or it is not executed properly. So what we have done is over the 3 years here in South Africa, I thank God in our ministry we have 7 lawyers that we have been crafting a document on various issues, called Ethics and Compliance. Now, what that document entails is, when Yvonne decides to leave church today, can she claim her offerings? Because this is the era where we are in. When somebody donates a house to me, can they say they want their house back? It's there. When somebody comes, is in our band, and then after 5 years says they abused me, I want my money. So we have to have what is called an ethics and compliance document. Now, this document, what we then do is, for you to become what we call a full-time member, it's one document that you must go through and understand. And one of the things that we talk about is these issues we are touching on. And one of the things that we have said is the process, that if you are involved, the first thing that we do is we bring you under counsel. We give you a team to help you, and if you become, a perpetrator for the second time, this is what we do for the third time. The fourth time, we involve family, and when it does not work, it is then up to the family and your wife to then decide,
All right, we seem to be having a little bit of connection problem with Apostle Manyonda. We will continue to try and have him back as he explains some of the actions that they're taking as a church. And I'm sure we can pick on 1 or 2 issues, as Mamalin has alluded to earlier on, that there is need for an audit, there is need to know what to do. And in black and white, then there is room for it to be abused. There is room for every system to be manipulated just because it is not written down. Is Apostle Manyonda back? Apostle, can you hear us? Okay, I think we have lost him. But all the same, this was the discussion that we were having on gender-based violence and the church. I do hope you were able to pick on 1, 2, or 3 lessons that will help us. The church system has been abused by predators who have no accountability and who choose not to have somebody to mentor and to walk the journey with them. Thank you so much, Zimbabwe, for joining us on Zimbabwe Daily as we go through the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Today is day 10. What are you doing to make your home, your community, and your nation a safer place? Join us again on Monday as we bring you day 12 of 16 days of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. My name is Yvonne Muchaka, and for my guests in the studio, Apostle Pastor Phil and Pastor Lynn, thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much to Apostle Duncan Manyonda, all the way from South Africa, for joining us and giving us nuggets to take home. And the crew behind the scenes, we say thank you so much and have a wonderful rest of the day.